Things are coming to a head between Israel and Hamas. We are at the end of the first stage of the ceasefire deal, and we haven't really entered into any kind of second stage yet. Things are coming to a head fast, and the situation looks really, really bad for Hamas. It looks like the end is finally in sight, and they will be destroyed in the near future. I'll lay that all out for you. Stick around to the end of the video. We're going to share some important information going on in the background that really points to the end of Hamas. But first, let's watch this report from Tamir Morag on Channel 14 Cable News.
תמיר מורג, כתבנו המדיני, שלום לך, שבוע טוב.
אהלן, שלום.
אז לא מעט התפתחויות ממש על השעות האחרונות. בחמאס אומרים אינדיקציות חיוביות לגבי משא ומתן לשלב ב', בישראל אומרים אנחנו לא מכירים שום התקדמות כזו.
נכון, משלחת של חמאס ביקרה בקהיר במהלך סוף השבוע, אבל אין כרגע משלחת ישראלית. חמאס דוחף ליעד אחד בלבד. השלב השני שיוביל מבחינתו לסיום המלחמה. ישראל כידוע מוכנה לסיום המלחמה בתנאי שחמאס יתפרק מנשקו, ולכן סטיב וויטקוף המתווך האמריקני מנסה איכשהו לרבע את המעגל הזה ולייצר תוכנית ביניים שמקובלת על ישראל, אבל חמאס דוחה אותה. על פיה נלך להפסקת אש של 50 ימים נוספים. במהלכה חמאס כבר ביום הראשון ישחרר מחצית מהחטופים. זה כרגע לא מתקדם. ביום ראשון, מחר, מתכנס הקבינט המדיני-ביטחוני, וסבירות לא מבוטלת בכלל שאנחנו נראה את הקבינט מחליט על מנופי לחץ נוספים מעבר להפסקת הסיוע ההומניטרי שהחלה כבר לפני כשבעה ימים. יכול להיות שאנחנו נראה גם פגיעה בהספקת המים והחשמל לרצועת עזה. כך או אחרת, בישראל לא מתכוונים לתת לחמאס להמשיך לענות לאורך זמן מהמצב הזה שבו יש הפסקת אש מצד אחד והוא לא משחרר חטופים מצד שני. חזרה ללחימה לגמרי על הפרק. יכול להיות שזה יהיה באופן מדורג, קודם עם איזשהן פשיטות נקודתיות, אולי עם תקיפות מהאוויר, אבל גם חזרה למלחמה במלוא כוחו של צה"ל, ולמעשה בהיקף ובצורה שלא ראינו עד היום, נמצאת על הפרק לא בטווח זמן של חודשים או של שבועות, אלא פחות מזה, כמו שאומר לי גורם מדיני.
Of course, as Tamir Morag just said, the Israeli army is getting ready for a major offensive. Keep that in mind. We're going to get to that in a few minutes. But he also mentioned that Steve Witkoff, Trump's envoy, has been putting forward this idea of another temporary extension of the ceasefire, not really the original phase 2 that would call for an end to the war, but some kind of extension, maybe a 50-day extension that would involve Hamas releasing large numbers, large percentages of the existing hostages, and Hamas is rejecting that because Hamas is demanding commitment that the war will be over, that Israel will remove its forces from Gaza and the war will end, and that's obviously something that the Israelis cannot agree to. I want to take you back to the beginning of the war in late 2023. At that time, right after the October 7th attacks, the Israelis cut off all the electricity and water to the Gaza Strip. And there were a lot of people screaming about that, how inhumane that is. But the reason the Israelis were doing that and were not going to be allowing any humanitarian aid in is that that would have led to a very swift war. Hamas, as you know well, has this massive network of tunnels that run deep underground. You've seen, if you've been watching our videos, we've done a few videos on the tunnels and you see how deep they are. And most of their fighting force and their supplies and their headquarters are deep, deep, deep underground in these tunnels. Now, these tunnels, because they're so far underground, require a lot of electricity in order to function. They even have to pump air down into there. And of course, there's no natural daylight down there. So without electricity and water, with that being cut off, it was only a matter of time, short amount of time, before the Hamas operatives in the tunnels would have to come above ground. And that massive tactical advantage that Hamas has had because of this network of tunnels underground, and it's a tactical advantage that no army has ever really had to deal with, or I should say a disadvantage. The IDF has had to deal with this problem all the way through. It's made it a very complex, a very difficult fighting zone. That tactical advantage would have been taken away. The Hamas fighters would have come above ground, and there they would have been defeated much more quickly, and there would have been many less deaths on both sides. But the Biden administration, Biden and Blinken, forced Israel. They threatened to withhold weapons unless the Israelis allowed large quantities of humanitarian aid in, even into the areas that Hamas still controlled, as is well documented. These shipments of humanitarian aid went directly into the hands of Hamas. They used that to fund the recruitment and the rebuilding. Their terror machine, their war machine was constantly replenished and funded by all of this humanitarian aid. They would sell it to people at exorbitant prices. A lot of the humanitarian aid was fuel that they used. It's the humanitarian aid that has allowed Hamas to remain in power in the Gaza Strip. It's allowed them to have resources, to pay people, to continue to be operatives for them, to wield power over the people. Without the humanitarian aid, Hamas would have been destroyed long ago. This war would have been over long ago. It's the humanitarian aid that has prolonged it. So it's very significant, as Tamir Morag mentioned in this report, that last week the Israelis finally cut off all the shipments of humanitarian aid in. Now, the quantities of humanitarian aid that have come in are so great that Hamas still has a fair amount in storage. They still have some supply, but that's going to run out. Now the clock is ticking so long as Israel does not resume the shipments of humanitarian aid in. Along with that, the IDF just last week switched chiefs of staff. Herzi Halevi was the chief of staff from before October 7th, has now stepped down, and he's been replaced by Eyal Zamir. And this new chief of staff is much more committed to actually finishing off Hamas. There was some disagreement or lack of seeing eye to eye between Prime Minister Netanyahu, between his government and the previous chief of staff. And Eyal Zamir is understood to be more, shall we say, more aggressive or more militant. And it's understood by all, including himself, from his remarks when he was appointed, that he was appointed in order to completely finish the job, to achieve total victory, and to destroy Hamas once and for all. That's why he's there. So we have this new chief of staff in place. We have a halting of the humanitarian aid. We also have Hamas's behavior over these last 6 weeks, 7 weeks, during this hostage release ceasefire deal. What you've all seen over this last couple months with these hostages being released in these humiliating, despicable ceremonies, just designed to torture them and the Israeli public psychologically, with Hamas waving around weapons, trying to show that they're still in power, and also what's been revealed about the treatment of the hostages. This has all led to the Israeli public being at a point right now, a boiling point emotionally, where the Israeli public is ready to explode. The Israeli public is enraged at Hamas and has never been more committed to its total destruction. Had Hamas handled the hostage releases differently, let's say they had done it kind of quietly and meekly, almost making it appear like a surrender, which is kind of what it was in the very first hostage deal near the beginning of the war, where Hamas was stunned by how powerful the Israeli offensive was, and they released over 100 hostages at that time. They didn't make big ceremonies of it. Had Hamas handled this differently and made it seem that they were somewhat deterred and weak, it might have convinced a segment of the Israeli population and in the Israeli political class that maybe they had done enough damage to Hamas and Hamas isn't a danger anymore. And that might have made it easier for Israel to be drawn in to a longer-term ceasefire. But the fact that Hamas behaved the way they did has really only made it more likely that the Israeli political establishment and certainly the Israeli public are committed to their total destruction. So Hamas kind of misplayed their hand here. In addition to all of this, we have what took place over the last few weeks, which is a meeting of the Arab League. It was a meeting called by the Egyptians. Leaders of most of the Arab countries got together to discuss an alternative to Donald Trump's plan to evacuate the citizens of Gaza. Now, of course, Trump's plan is based on the reality on the ground. Gaza is unlivable. So long as those people are there, there's going to be wars with Israel. There are tens of thousands of unexploded bombs. There are buildings that are on the verge of collapse, and you cannot have people live there. So the Trump administration, of course, famously wants to evacuate everyone. The Arab world, most of the Arab leaders, shall we say, objecting to it, and that's an understatement. The Trump administration turned to them and said, okay, bring me a plan of your own. So the Arab League met and they came up with a plan. It's being called the Egypt plan. But according to this plan, Hamas is no longer in power because the Arab leadership knows that Israel will never stand for Hamas to remain, and the Trump administration as well is committed to Hamas being totally removed. So even according to their plan that allows the Gazan people to remain in Gaza, Hamas is removed from power and completely demilitarized. And Hamas put out a statement a couple days ago saying that while they're grateful for this plan from the Arab leadership that allows the Gazans to remain in Gaza, they do not agree to any plan that includes them being completely demilitarized. So here you have a little bit of, shall we say, not seeing eye to eye between Hamas and the Arab leadership. The Arab leadership recognizes that Hamas has got to go. The Israeli government cut off humanitarian aid. There's a new chief of staff. The IDF is in full preparation now, and there's a lot of prep going on. This is what we're hearing here in Israel for a major offensive against Hamas that is to come soon. That's where things stand. So looking ahead, we're kind of in the calm before the storm. And what we can expect one way or another over the course of the coming days, we are going to see the pressure increase on Hamas significantly. And ultimately, we are probably going to see a major IDF offensive that finally, once and for all, does away with Hamas completely. They're going to be destroyed. There will be no more Hamas in the Gaza Strip. Please make sure to tell people about this channel, to subscribe, and be sure to visit Israel365news.com. Please visit Israel365action.com to see everything that we're doing there. And we'll be back with more updates soon.